Here is one flaw on your business bank statements that could be declining you for business funding up to 2 million, 5 million plus, and even reducing the amount you get. Online transfers. Have you ever heard or seen where it says online transfer checking and then it has the account number, then you have the transaction number, the amount that was deposited, and the additions as well as the electronic withdrawals? So it's one thing to say, I have multiple business checking accounts because I differentiate from payroll to other expenses. Then I have equipment and then products, inventory, etc. That's okay. And as you grow, you'll see that. And you're probably moving money from one account to your primary one, where then that's the one you use to go and apply for business funding. But if it isn't verifiable, if it's not being moved underneath the same entity, underneath the same business entity you have, it is a whole different S Corp, C Corp, or it's perhaps you have a different name, another way you're operating. It's unverifiable because you get paid through a vendor and then that vendor moves money into your account, or they push it into one other account and then they move that money to another account and then it gets into another one, or however that happens. You have to be very careful of that, because when you are transferring from multiple accounts, that can look like it's not a true or organic deposit. In other words, we don't count that as stated revenue as your overall. So you may have one month where you're saying, well, I'm doing 300, 100,000 or so, 60,000. Yeah, but I'm seeing a lot of online transfers where, hey, it does check up the box where it's business checking underneath the same entity. But if for some reason that main account that we're reviewing, we see too many online transfers, but very little actually being pushed into that one account directly, like you only put in 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 for payroll, and everything else you're depositing and electronically withdrawing are all these online transfers. And we'll have to perhaps see the other accounts. So you'll have to provide to us those business bank statements so we can make sure everything aligns and what is actually reporting and what's actually happening there. What's the big picture of why you're moving money from one account to another? And perhaps we have already spoken about this, but we need to verify all of that legitimacy and to make sure, because if you're depositing and you're using that one account that you went to apply with, you have to understand from the lender's point of view, all of these transfers from multiple accounts will look like you are manipulating bank statements. Whether you are doing it intentionally or not, that's what it looks like to a lender and myself. And I'm looking through business bank statements when I review them, and I go, okay, what is it that they are depositing? Is it frequently? How much are they doing? How many times per month? Do they have non-sufficient funds, negative days, and a lot more? And so when I see things like your bank statements and I look through the information, make sure everything aligns at the top, and I go through all of the deposits and more, and I see a lot of these online transfer checking and you have multiple different numbers and associations, that's one part. Are you moving it from another business checking account to your primary one? Okay, well, we're going to need to also see that account and see those bank statements on how you're pushing money through. But if it's also random, if you're just frequently and then infrequently depositing and it's such a random deposit, that can decline you for funding because it looks suspicious. And where are the majority of these deposits coming from? Like I said earlier, if you have a secondary or third account and there's very little, or there's more in that one than the one you went to apply with, and you can see it when you're transferring from those other accounts into your primary one, we question that. So what you should do moving forward is make sure that you are depositing into that one business checking account where you generate the most amount of revenue, your sales, everything is going into that one account, and you are applying with that one account, the highest generating revenue account. Now you might have other things again, like for products and inventory where you need to move money into first, and we'll have to verify. We'll have to ask you for those accounts. It's one other thing to say, hey, I have multiple banks, and that won't disqualify you per se, but we have to make sure it's underneath all the same entity. And again, it's not random depositing. It's not like there's very little in this one, and then in this one, there's a huge amount, and we're questioning, like, why it isn't somewhat even or around the same range. So make sure that you understand your balances. Too high balances on one account, on a secondary account, but very little on a primary account. We question that, and a lot of the times that can result in a decline. And so be very thoughtful again and cognizant of how you are moving money in and out of your account. If we cannot verify, you have another business checking account, you have two of them. Well, we may not even take a look at that depending on why you showed us this primary account when all of the stated revenue, it's only coming from payroll and a few other things that only amounted to 20,000, when in fact you're saying your revenue is at 100, 200,000, for example. Yeah, but 100 or to 150,000 of that money, is coming from all these online transfers from checking, online transfer to checking when you're electronically withdrawing. And if we also see that there's too much of these deposits making too much up of the actual deposits, like, yeah, you transfer from checking and all of this, you deposited over 300,000 and only 10,000 was deposited into that one account. Like, that doesn't look good. You have too much already in one account, you have very little in this one that you're applying with. And that can result in a decline, but we can also take another look because you're using business checking to business checking. It's not from your customers that are moving money from their PayPal account into your business checking account. That's a different story. And if you're moving from personal to checking, that usually doesn't count as stated revenue. So be very careful that you're moving personal to checking because that won't count as stated revenue. In other words, organic deposits, not your overall revenue. So you could be in your personal account putting money in that you're saying you're making 30,000, and then you move that money into your business checking account, but it only says nothing because you didn't even deposit anything in that business checking account to begin with. And that's not outweighing what you sent from here to there. So we have to decline you for that. And so just to recap, and I did put a few notes here. I have it all up here, but I just wanted to make sure I covered every one of them. And that is just to make sure that your business checking account or accounts, when it comes to that, are all underneath the same entity. It's obvious that if you're transferring it from a different business to this business, that won't count. This doesn't make sense. But if one account shows more than a secondary account, like higher depositing into one account, like your secondary account is a lot more, like I have a lot of examples of, like I just said, and then you're only depositing into this account 10,000 of payroll or credit of this amount and this. And we're like 100,000 here, 20,000 there. And then we see it in our other bank statements and we go, okay, well, there's a somewhat similar frequency of depositing, only 10,000 deposited here. Okay, well, that can disqualify you, and that will result in that whole, you're online transferring from multiple accounts and to a lender that looks like you're manipulating bank statements even though you're not. And it can be hard to verify if you're getting paid by vendors or other people. And if they're sending money from a different format, PayPal, other ways into your account, and then you're moving that money to this account, it's harder to keep track of, and we can't always take your word for it. Although I trust you when we get to that point, but it's a different thing when we're speaking about the numbers. And so make sure if you have multiple business checking accounts that we will evaluate you for them. If we don't ask for them in the beginning, I will come back to you, or one of the individuals from my team will come back to you and we'll ask you for those account numbers, send those bank statements that we need, those complete ones for the months, and then we can compare and contrast, see what you're actually depositing here, and perhaps there's a lot more being deposited there and less into your primary one you applied with. And even then we have to make sure, and if that doesn't look good, then we can decline you. And to see how those are being pushed into that account is another question. Are those verifiable? How are you collecting money into those accounts? Is it enough revenue? Is it not organic revenue? And that can also disqualify you. So understand the fluctuations can decline you for that. And then the random deposits, I'm questioning, like, why are these being deposited, or where are these deposits coming from? You can't even deposit it from your own other business checking account to this one. It's coming from another source, and that will decline you. So random deposits month to month, even 1 month and then miss the next month and another month comes up and there's a random deposits, and it's a little bit too much random deposits overall. And electronically withdrawing is another question I'll get into here in a second. But where are the majority of your deposits coming from is what we want to make sure of. And that's why I always tell every business owner, like I have a lot of owners who do millions upon millions, hundreds upon thousands, 6, 7 figures, even less than 6 figures. And it's unfortunate because they come to me and I look at their bank statements and I go, well, how are you transferring? How are you wire transferring? How are you electronically with transferring or ACH depositing? How is all of that? If we can't verify, you're moving money from multiple business checking accounts, but one account has way too much, the other one that you've applied with and you sent us bank statements for, you're just showing us all the transfers. And there's more transfers than there are organic deposits with sales, ACH, etc., checks into that account. So your overall instead is 20,000 as opposed to taking away the online transfers where you put in 100 to 200,000. You're realistically only doing 10 to 20,000 a month. And that's what we can evaluate you on, if anything. If not, we can decline the file. So another question that I get a lot of is, how about the deposits and withdrawals? So this is a good example. So underneath the same circumstances, even if it weren't these, where you're online transferring and it's suspicious activity, we have to know that you are depositing more than what you are withdrawing on a month-to-month basis. So I have a lot of business owners who I go through their bank statements and I see their deposits and additions. We see over 300,000. Okay, well, how much of that are you actually depositing primarily into that account? You didn't deposit anything, or you only deposited 100,000, but you did online transferred 400 to 500,000. Well, that's not going to look good, and you're doing it month to month. And we're looking, if we didn't ask for your other business checking accounts, we know that that's where it's not coming from. Or we think it will, but there are just too many transfers for us to rely on that. And how you're getting money pushed into those other accounts is another question, whether you're doing it organically or not. And so when I see more withdrawals, than deposited, that's a question, and that can result in a declined file. So if you're, for example, depositing 300,000, but you withdrew 365,000, that doesn't look good. And you won't have enough sufficient cash flow to service the debt. What if you go, you're going negative, and then you're starting and ending bank balances don't look clean. You started off with barely a little bit. Your average daily bank balances is below 1,000. Most lenders want to see 1,000 and above, if not 1,500, if not 2,000 and above, and then consistently. And so we're fearful of giving you that money because of all of these reasons. And there's a lot more in bank statements that I look at, but I just wanted to cover all of that for now. Hopefully you got value out of this video. You understand that you may have multiple business checking accounts, not to sound redundant, but we have to verify those. And if we ask for them, we wanted to make sure what you're depositing into those accounts and why that money is being moved into this account that you may have already expressed with me. In other circumstances, we may just decline you altogether and then come back and ask you for those accounts. And we declined you because frequency and higher balances over here that you're transferring, and then lower balances in this account that you are using to apply with. And so it's not lining up. And it might be random deposits, it might not be. And then frequency of depositing. And then other parts of the equation we look at is like non-sufficient funds and negative balances, etc. But I won't get into that. And then the amount of deposits that you're pushing into your account, starting and ending bank balances is another thing. And I have multiple ones here opened just to kind of go through them. And that's all I'm going to cover for now. There's more I can get into, but look down below for more help. There is also a business funding questionnaire to fill out. If you haven't yet, get in touch with me so I can help you. And moving forward, just know, use that one account, you're depositing the money into that account. And if you're depositing money that goes into another business checking account, is it your highest generating revenue? That's the one you want to apply with. Does it show the overall picture too? That's the one you want to end up with. Now, if you're moving it from one account to another or multiple, we have to verify and see that. But again, it can result in a decline if you have too many high balances in one, low balances in another one. And it's just like all over the place. And it's another question if we can even verify where those transfers are coming from. So that is everything from me. Talk to you soon.